Hello, and welcome to Fox Token Games. My name is Talon. This video is going to be the first part in a tutorial series for a game called Heroclix. Heroclix is an awesome game where you can take some of your favorite characters and battle them against each other. This allows us to finally settle the decade debate between who would win in a fight between the Hulk or Superman. But this video isn't intended to be an introduction to Heroclix if you've never seen it before. For that, you should check out TableTop Teacher's video, Heroclix, an Introduction to the Curious. I'll leave a link in the info box and in the description below. Tabletop Teacher has made some incredible videos about Heroclix in the past. Unfortunately, Heroclix rules change every few years as the creators WizKids attempt to make the game more fun and accessible. This means that a lot of Tabletop Teacher's videos are no longer accurate. Because of this, I've taken it upon myself to update his old videos so you can play them with modern rules. For this series, I'll be teaching the 2021 rulebook for Heroclix. Now, don't panic if you're watching this in 2022 or 2023. As of releasing this video in June 2022, these are the most up-to-date rules, and I doubt we'll see any significant revisions for the foreseeable future. However, you can always go to heroclix.com, where you can find the most up-to-date rulebook. I'll also include a link to that in the description below. So let's stop wasting time and get straight into it, starting with the character dial. Each character in Heroclix can be found attached to their base, or dial. This dial contains most of the information about a character, and it's something you should familiarize yourself with as quickly as possible. Let's start with this little window. Inside the window, you'll see 4 big black numbers and 1 little red number. The top number next to the boot symbol is the character's speed. This is how far a character can go in a single action. Below that, next to the fist, you'll find the attack value. This is how easy it is for your character to land attacks on their enemies. Below that, next to the shield, you'll find a character's defense value. This is how hard a character is to hit. To the right of the defense value, you'll find the character's damage value next to the starburst icon. This is how much it hurts to get hit by the character. Each of these values might also have a colored box around it. These colors represent the different powers and abilities a character has access to. These powers will change throughout the course of the game and as a character takes damage or gets healed. Each of these powers and abilities will be covered in its own video. The little red number is the click number. Each character begins the game on a certain click, called their starting click, and as they take damage, you'll click their base up numbers until eventually they are KO'd. Above the starburst icon, you'll see a character's range value next to 1 or more lightning bolts. The range value is how far a character can shoot with a ranged attack, and the amount of lightning bolts is how many targets a character can hit in a single attack. Your character's dial might also have a star icon or a plus icon. The star indicates that this character has a trait, which can be found on the character's card. The plus icon means that the character has an improved ability, which you can find circled around the character's icon on their card. We'll revisit traits and improved abilities later down the line. If we go clockwise around the dial, you'll find the character's name. Past that, you might see 1 or more symbols. These symbols represent team abilities, and they represent certain teams or factions that a character might be a part of that gives them a benefit. Beyond that, we can see a character's point cost. This is how much of your team's build total that this character will take up if you put them on your force. The more expensive a character is, the more powerful they tend to be. There might also be multiple point values here, each listed in a different color. These are different starting lines a character has, allowing them to be played at multiple costs. We'll talk about point costs and build totals more in a later part of this video. A little further past the point value, you'll see the set symbol and rarity color next to a character's collector number. Your character might also have a silver or green ring around their base. All of these ideas will be covered in a separate video that'll also cover how to buy Heroclix. Now that you know how to read a character's dial, we can jump straight into the Heroclix turn sequence. In Heroclix, a turn is made up of 4 distinct phases: the beginning of turn, the action phase, the end of turn, and the clear phase. The beginning of turn is a phase that can mostly be ignored unless you have an ability that specifically mentions it. For instance, the Watcher from the Disney Plus Miniatures game has a trait that says at the beginning of your turn, you may turn the Watcher's dial to any click. This effect would trigger since it's the beginning of turn. After that is the action phase. This is where the majority of the game is going to take place. The action phase is where you're going to be giving your characters actions to perform various feats, including moving and attacking. Since the action phase is all about giving actions, let's talk about what actions are. In Heroclix, you're allowed to give a number of costed actions to your team equal to the point value divided by 100. So in a standard 300-point game, you can give 3 costed actions to anyone in your team. Actions are represented by action tokens. These are most commonly poker chips placed under the figure, but you can use beads, dice, or anything you want as long as all players are aware of how you're identifying action tokens. The rules for action tokens are as follows. A character can only be given 1 costed action each turn. So turn 1, I cannot move Spider-Man, then give him a move action, since I've already given him an action this turn. A character cannot be given more than 2 actions. You cannot give a character with 2 actions another costed action, and if a game effect would cause that character to gain a 3rd action, that effect is ignored. There are a number of ways to remove action tokens from your characters, but the most common is by clearing, but we'll talk more about clearing when we hit the clear phase. So now that you know what actions are, let's talk about the 5 types of actions that exist in the game. These are move, range, close, power, and free. Luckily, these names are pretty descriptive, so you can probably tell what each one is just by the name alone. When you give your character a move action, you can move the character up to their speed value. However, there are a lot of restrictions when it comes to moving, so let's talk about a few of those. When moving, you can move in any direction, both orthogonally and diagonally. If you move into a space adjacent to an enemy character, you have to stop your movement. But if you start your movement adjacent to an opposing character, then you have to perform what's called a breakaway. To break away, roll a d6. This is a normal 6-sided die. And on the result of 4 through 6, you can break away and move normally. However, if you fail the breakaway roll by rolling a 1 through 3, the action ends immediately. Terrain also plays a massive role when it comes to moving, but we'll talk more about this when we discuss maps. It's also worth noting that you can move through friendly characters, but not enemy characters. Range and close actions both allow you to make attacks either at range or up close. To make a ranged attack, choose a number of opposing characters up to the number of bolts your character has that are within range and line of fire. You should already know how to find your character's range, but we'll discuss line of fire when we talk about maps and terrain. To make a close attack, you can choose any number of opposing characters up to your number of bolts who are adjacent to you. Once targets are selected, all attacks follow the same steps. Look at your character's attack value and roll 2d6. If the number you rolled plus your character's attack is equal to or greater than your opponent's defense value, you've hit, and you can deal your character's damage split however you like among any number of hit characters. Just make sure that all of your damage must be assigned. This means that one character can be dealt 0 damage, as long as the rest of your damage gets assigned somewhere else. Let's look at some examples. Here, Wolverine is attacking Dr. Doom with a close combat attack. Here, Wolverine has an attack of 11, and Dr. Doom has a defense of 18, so Wolverine needs to roll a 7 to hit. One fact that's important to know is on 2d6, you have a 50% chance of rolling 7 or higher. Unfortunately, in this example, Wolverine didn't get lucky. His attack plus his roll doesn't equal Dr. Doom's defense. The action resolves, and Wolverine is given an action token. Here, in another example, Malekith is targeting these Asgardians with a ranged attack. All of them are within Malekith's 7 range. Valkyrie has a defense of 16, Lady Sif has a 17, and Thor has an 18. Let's say Malekith rolls a 7, bringing his total up to 17. With that 17, he manages to hit Valkyrie and Sif, but misses Thor. Since he has a damage value of 3, he chooses to deal 1 damage to Valkyrie and 2 to Sif, who then click their bases once for each damage taken. This is actually enough to KO Lady Sif, so she's removed from the board and Malekith's player scores the points that Lady Sif is worth. Heroclix also features critical hits and critical misses. Once you roll your dice, if you have 2 6s, that attack is a critical hit. Critical hits represent a character landing a lucky blow. On a critical hit, any target becomes hit, even if that character would normally miss. The damage is also increased by 1, and you gain the knockback key phrase. We'll talk more about knockback in the future. A critical miss is the opposite of a critical hit, and it represents a weapon backfiring when you roll 2 1s. For this, your attack becomes a miss even if it would normally hit, and after action resolves, your character takes 1 unavoidable damage. Ouch. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into attacking and defending once we start bringing in powers and abilities, but for now, those are the basics to get you going. When a character takes damage, make sure to click their dial clockwise for each click of damage taken, and when a character is healed, click their dial for each click healed. A character can never be healed past their original starting line. If a character is damaged and a KO click is revealed, that character is KO'd is removed from the map, and the opponent who KO'd them scores the points for that figure. The final type of costed actions are power actions. These actions are used to activate certain powers, abilities, and traits. For instance, the Watcher that we looked at earlier can be given power actions to activate the power telekinesis. The final type of action is the free action. Free actions don't give a character an action token, and they don't count towards your action total. A character can use any number of free actions on their turn, but they can only activate a single free action effect once per turn. This Malekith currently has the sidestep power showing. This can be used to give him a free action, allowing him to move up to 2 squares. However, remember that I can't do that more than one time a turn. It's important to always know what free actions you and your opponents can use. And that's it for actions. Moving on from there, we can talk about the remaining phases. The end of turn phase is similar to the beginning of turn phase. Any abilities that say at the end of your turn would activate during this phase. Finally, we have the clear phase. During this phase, any character who didn't take any costed actions has all of their action tokens removed. This is called clearing. Note that this step isn't optional. Any character who didn't receive any costed actions must clear. This is not a choice. Now let's talk about how maps work. In Heroclix, maps are 2 foot by 3 foot sheets, usually made of paper, that are separated into grids. These maps usually represent iconic locations for their respective series, and they're where you're going to be doing your battle. The first thing you should do when looking at a map is look at the bottom right corner. There you can find the map's name, any special rules it might have, and most importantly, whether the map is indoor, outdoor, or indoor-outdoor. Whether or not the map is inside or outside will affect how certain characters can move. Now, if you look around a map, you might see certain squares that are colored differently from the rest. These are the different types of terrain. On either side of the map, you'll find an area highlighted pink. This is the starting area, and it's where you'll place your figures during the beginning of the game. Next, you might see areas that have a dashed green and white line, or just a green line in older maps. These areas are hindering terrain. We'll discuss hindering terrain more when we talk about line of fire. If you see blue, well, that's water terrain. For the most part, you can ignore water terrain, but some figures might have benefits for being in water that you might want to keep your eye on. Next up is the brown blocking terrain. Blocking terrain does exactly what it sounds like. It blocks characters from walking through it or seeing through it. Think of blocking terrain like a wall between you and your attacker, which is convenient because these thick black lines are walls, and they're considered blocking terrain for all in-game effects. They just sit in between spaces instead of taking up a space on their own. This should go without saying, but 2 characters who occupy opposite sides of a wall are not considered adjacent. Red lines on the map are elevated terrain. These represent heightened areas on the map, like a balcony. A character cannot move directly up or down elevations. If they wish to move up or down an elevation, they have to find the transition square for that elevation. These represent stairs or ladders, and you can find them with little triangles around that elevation. The character must move between both transition squares if they want to move up or down an elevation. Just like with walls, characters occupying different elevations are not considered adjacent, even if they're on transition squares. If your map is labeled as indoor-outdoor, you might see an area of the map that's surrounded by yellow. This area is considered indoors, while the rest of the map is outdoors. But we'll talk more about the differences in indoor-outdoor terrain when we go over the Powers and Abilities card in another video. Certain maps might also have orange areas. These are special areas, and you'll find rules for them next to the map name in the bottom right corner. If for any reason you have to move between the diagonal of 2 squares, you'll always move through the least restrictive square. So if you move diagonally between a piece of blocking terrain and a piece of hindering terrain, you consider it as moving through the hindering terrain. If you move through 2 squares of blocking terrain, then your movement is considered blocked. So now let's cover the last big rule in Heroclix, line of fire. In a lot of miniatures games, the rules for determining if a character has line of fire can be a little convoluted, and unfortunately, Heroclix is no different. Line of fire is effectively what your character can see. To determine if your character has line of fire, imagine a line going from the center of your character base to the base of your target square. If that line crosses another character, blocking terrain, or higher elevated terrain, then that line of fire is blocked. If your line of fire crosses hindering terrain in a square other than the one that you occupy, then your line of fire is considered hindered. Imagine that your target is taking cover behind the terrain. Because of this, The target gains +1 to their defense if a ranged combat attack is hindered. Just like movement, if you draw a line of fire between a diagonal, your line of fire is considered to be the least restrictive option of either side. So if you draw a line between a character and hindering terrain, that line of fire is hindered. If you draw it between two characters, that line of fire is blocked. However, if it's between hindering and clear terrain, then your line of fire is clear. If your character is touching one of the edge pieces of elevated terrain, then you're on the rim. The rim is the only place where you can make ranged combat attacks targeting a character of a lower elevation. For instance, in this situation, I couldn't make an attack against Dr. Doom here because I'd have to shoot through the floor to hit him. But here, I can see him over the edge. While on the rim, you can shoot over outdoor blocking terrain, characters, and the line of fire is only hindered if the target square is in hindering terrain. While on the rim, your line of fire is this cone. Any more than that, and you can see that the line of fire intersects another square of terrain on a higher level. Therefore, it's blocked. Line of fire is an intimidating subject for new players, so don't get stressed out if you didn't internalize all of these rules on the first go. Play some games and learn the rules as you encounter them. One of the final things we're going to cover in this video is destroy actions. Destroy actions allow you to target blocking terrain and blow it up. To use this action, your character must have at least 3 damage. Then, give your character either a range or close action. Then choose either a square of blocking terrain within range and line of fire for ranged actions, or adjacent squares for close actions. The blocking terrain is then destroyed, no roll necessary, and replaced by a debris marker, becoming hindering terrain for the rest of the game. For walls, you have to target the square on the other side of the wall as if you were shooting through it, and the resulting debris is placed on either side of the wall. Destroy actions can be a great way to open up new avenues of attack for your team, and you should always be aware of where you can destroy to get the jump on your opponent. But remember, your character needs to have 3 damage or more to be strong enough to demolish walls. The final thing we're going to discuss in this video is team building, and how to start a game. The first step in building your team is knowing the point value for the game you're going to play. The standard build total in Heroclix is a 300 point match. However, you can make this number as large or as small as you want. From there, pick any number of pieces in your collection and any starting lines that they might have so your point value is equal to or less than the build total. Try and get your team's point cost as close as you can to the build total. Don't fret about losing 10 points, but if your team is 50 points short, you can field an entire other character for that. When building your team, you should look at character cards. Beneath each character's name is their keywords. Keywords are titles that characters have earned or teams that they've been in. For instance, this Spider-Man has the Avengers, Champions, S.H.I.E.L.D., and Spider-Man family keywords. If you have at least 2 characters on your force and your entire team shares a keyword, they become a theme team. Theme teams get some minor bonuses that we'll talk about as we finish this up. This team is your starting force. Now, there are some more restrictions when it comes to building your starting force, but we'll discuss those restrictions when we talk about figure rarities. Once you've created your starting force, you can determine your initiative bonus. You get +1 initiative bonus for each member in your theme team, up to a maximum of +3 more than your opponent. For instance, if this is the game I'm playing, with Valkyrie, Sif, and Thor, I have an Asgardian theme team, and get +3 to my initiative bonus. If my opponent's playing a Fantastic Four team, they all share the Fantastic Four keyword, and he gets a +4 to his initiative. However, if my opponent's team looks like this, just a single Dr. Doom, he's not a theme team because there's not more than 2 characters on his force. From there, both players roll 2d6 and add their initiative bonus. The player with the highest roll becomes the first player. The first player not only gets to go first, but he or she gets to pick the map that you'll be playing on. The second player then chooses which starting area they want on the map. Players then place their pieces in any spot on their starting area. From there, any effects that trigger at the beginning of the game or at the start of the game go now. For instance, John Walker Captain America has a trait that allows him to start the game with Captain America's shield equipped. If I paid for that trait, I could put his shield on now from outside the game without paying for its cost. Finally, the game can begin with the first player. From there, the game will continue until all of one player's pieces have been defeated. If you're playing in a tournament, there might also be a time limit. Once that time limit is up, the player who scored the most points by defeating figures is the winner. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is only the first video in this series, but it does make up the bulk of the game. It might be a good idea to take a break and play a practice game without powers and abilities to get a grasp on the basic concepts. More videos will be in this series, including the next video, where we will go over the powers and abilities card.